Welcome to the Breaking 90 podcast, where we talk about all things sustainable fat loss. We take people on 90-day journeys to creating fat loss forever. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Breaking 90 podcast. I'm your host, Alex Harriman, here with my co-host, Kelly Sarlo. We are two of the coaches of Breaking 90 Fitness. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm happy to be just having coffee with you today.
Yeah?
Yeah,
How's that?
because I haven't been sleeping very well.
Oh, no.
Both dogs ended up with like pancreatitis and a stomach issue. So we've been up through the night cleaning up the bodily fluids from both ends of the dogs.
That's fun.
Super fun. Yeah.
Can't
So
you just lock them in a laundry room or something?
no. I think you're supposed to get rid of the stuff so they don't get more sick.
Gross.
Yeah, it has been, but they've been treated properly. They're super ironically happy because they get to eat chicken and rice. So they just think like this is the bee's knees. Yeah.
How can we do that again?
Yeah, really. What else could we get into? Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Right on.
Anyway.
What do you got today for a topic?
Okay, we have covered this many times, but I wanted to break it down differently, and that is BAMs or bare ass minimums.
Okay.
It's one of the concepts that so many of our clients absolutely love. People in our free Forever Fit, Forever Strong group who follow us on Facebook absolutely love it as well, because it's a really great and easy thing to apply to life. However, I have particular questions to help people understand how to actually figure out what their bare ass minimums should be.
Okay.
Because I think for some people, they don't really know how to gauge what that is, and maybe a little bit of direction would be great. Does that work?
Absolutely. And I
Okay.
I agree with you. I think it's a difficult concept when it's something that you're new you're implementing for the first time, I guess.
Yeah. So before I kind of grill you with my questions, which are leading so that clients can know what to do with this, can you kind of just recap what bare ass minimums are for everyone listening?
So, in my words, and you might have a slightly different variation of this, but in my words, like what we want our bare ass minimum to be is the least that we could do to keep moving forward towards our goals. And so it's like setting a baseline that you won't let yourself fall below even on your worst day. And so when I think of BAMs, they can be in any area of your health and fitness. But when I think of BAMs, they should be something that challenges you on your worst day, but they're pretty easy on your best days.
Okay, I love that. So, first question then is how should people or how can people go about determining what the BAM should be? And maybe you can break that down with nutrition and movement or whatever other areas that you want to cover.
It's a great question. Right out of the gate, I'd ask, is there anything you really specifically want to work on? Like, is there anything that sticks out to you that's lacking or that you really want to focus on for whatever reason? And then from there we can start peeling apart the kind of layers of the onion and look at everything and see if there's any low-hanging fruit. So when I say low-hanging fruit, is there anything that we could change a little bit that could have a great impact? And so, for instance, if somebody's already sleeping like 8 hours a night pretty effortlessly, I'm not going to set a BAM for sleep
Mhm.
because they're doing well with sleep. If somebody's really struggling to get 6 hours of sleep every night, that might be a really great place to start.
Mhm.
Because we know that even adding 15 minutes of sleep consistently is going to have a great impact on their energy, the way they feel, the way they recover. So it's very dependent on the individual and where their strengths and weaknesses lie, where they're doing really well, where they're struggling. But I'd look in all three categories. I'd look in the movement, I'd look in the mindset, I'd look in the nutrition, and then I'd start breaking those apart. How's your sleep? How's your stress? How's your day-to-day movement? How's your exercise specific movement? How has your recovery been? How's your protein? How's your fruits? How's your vegetables? Are you staying under your calories or your points goal? Are you hitting enough water on a day-to-day basis? So there's like a million different ways we can go, but that's what I want to kind of do with each individual is look at all of those things and more and see, ooh, this is where a little change could have a great impact.
Cool. So, I think about someone who's listening who lists or listened to your list and is like, oh my God, I'm sucking at all of them. Right. And it's like that kind of overwhelm of where do I even begin? So, of that list that you just gave us, what would you identify could or would easily have one of the biggest impacts that they could choose?
If you're sucking at all those, you need to do a factory reset and fix everything. No, I'm just kidding.
Find the little pin.
I'm just kidding. We've all been there, so don't feel bad if you listen to that and you feel overwhelmed. Um, Start with, like I said, the one that you think could have the greatest impact on your current situation, or the one that's going to turn your world upside down the least. Right?
That's cool.
Like if you're like, for instance, I worked with a client for many, many years who always struggled with protein, no matter how long we worked together, she struggled with protein. And we slowly increased her protein intake over time. But if I on day one was like, okay, you're gonna focus on protein, like she would have been so overwhelmed because that was the most daunting one to her. So where I don't want to remove it as a target, as a goal that we're gonna work towards, if it feels really daunting in the beginning, it might not be the best place to start because we want to build momentum, we want to build wins, and then that can be the catalyst to a long, successful journey.
Cool. It kind of triggers this statement of like, okay, I can do this, right? So it's kind of finding what could you do that would not stretch you too much, but would get a fast win, which creates momentum or confidence.
Yeah, and so in that example, say this client like really struggles with protein, and most days they get one serving of protein, say, and we want them to get three, four, maybe five servings of protein.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, on their worst days, they're getting zero or one servings. So am I going to set a BAM of one serving of protein? Because it's probably not going to have a drastic impact on the way they feel if they're just getting one serving of protein most days. But if we can increase their water intake or their recovery or like how many steps they're getting in a day by a little bit, those might have a much bigger impact on the way they feel, the way they live, and the progress that they make.
Hmm. I like that. I'm gonna kind of sidestep for a second here. Just as a note to people who are real keeners who will be listening to the show, think that they're listening really well and start setting BAMs in an ideal way. Because I've heard this many times from clients where they're like, okay, I have to go back to basics. I have to go back to my BAMs. So I'm going to do 4 proteins a day. I'm going to do 10,000 steps a day. And we're not talking the same language here, right? This is not a bare ass minimum. This is you trying to, as you said, kind of factory reset, but then hitting the perfectionism button again
Yeah.
and thinking, I'm going to do all or nothing. And that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, there's if we think of all of these things so all of those factors I identified earlier kind of exist on their own continuum or scale. And there's three marks that I see on that scale. Or four, I guess. There's four marks that I see on that scale. Mark number one is zero, absolutely nothing. Mark number two is your BAMs. Mark number three is your average. And mark number four is your end goal or ideal goal. That's the top of the scale.
Love it.
So they don't necessarily get split into equal 25% portions on that scale. They might be super close together at the top. They might be super close together at the bottom. Three of them might be down here, one up there. But those four marks should exist on that continuum from 0 to 100%. Zero is always at the bottom. Your end goal or what you consider ideal is always at the top. Your BAM should be lower than your average.
But they're moving. Your
Yeah,
BAMs and your
absolutely.
average are constantly moving if you are consistent with your BAMs.
Even your end goal might eventually move, but that's
Cool.
the top of the scale
Yeah.
that we're looking at.
Okay.
And
I
so
like
when
it.
you say something like 10,000 steps is my ideal, that's great. Put it at the top of the scale. And you might this isn't to say some days you're not going to do 30,000 steps because you went to amusement park and walked all day with your kids or whatever, but your average should be under that ideal, and your BAM, what you're going to challenge yourself to on your worst days, should be under your average.
Mhm.
So the whole purpose of this is slowly we increase that BAM as it becomes easy. This isn't a fast process. If you're knocking it out of the park week after week, then we start moving up the BAM, the bare ass minimum of what we're challenging ourselves to. What this does is it automatically also moves up the average, and the average stays higher than the BAM.
Love it. Okay, so then I know you kind of touched on figuring out which ones to focus on, which I like because you're bringing it back to what would have the biggest impact. How many would you say that people ideally could or should focus on before we're hitting an overwhelm again?
I think 1 to 3 at a time. You might get people that are exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, I think 1 to 3 is plenty to focus on at a time. And you need to stick to them long enough to see progress before you change. You
Okay,
can't be changing your BAMs every single week, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, or you're never going to make progress. So you need to stick to a BAM long enough that it becomes easy, and you're like, you know what? It probably doesn't make sense for me to focus on protein anymore because I'm effortlessly hitting a protein goal that I'm content with. Let's remove that from the equation and bring in a new BAM with the first two that I'm still working on.
cool. Okay, I like that. So it's kind of a moving parts or a labyrinth of BAMs
Yeah.
as you're getting closer to that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't need to be the same three that you work on your whole health and fitness journey, and it shouldn't be really. Like these are the ones that are going to move the needle on your journey that challenge you that you need to focus on, right? These are your frogs, if you will, in a
Mhm.
lot of the cases.
Okay. Okay. So my last question then, or last scripted question, I'll say, is how do we determine? No, I lied. I want to ask you two questions. Sorry, one just popped into my head. You said you need to focus on them long enough. Can you define for individuals what long enough means?
I'd say long enough is an amount of time that you've seen progress or change, and that the BAM itself no longer challenges you
Okay. So we
or isn't relevant to your goal.
Okay, that's cool too. That's a different qualifier. So let's say I reset my BAMs on a Monday. I've had kind of setback in my previous week, and I get back on track with BAMs on Monday, and I do it for 4 days. It's Thursday now. Is that long enough?
Have you seen progress? And is it easy now? Probably not. It's got to be like, I hate to put a specific amount of time on it because in certain situations it's going to take less or more. I would argue that 4 days is never going to be enough. Um, but in order for us to see progress, like I want to work through at least a week or two. So we've seen a weekend, we've seen a Friday night, we've been through the challenging days that we typically struggle on. We've been through some highs and lows on the bathroom scale, so we can factor in or out water retention accordingly. Um, I would say you should be going probably 2 weeks before even touching a BAM, and at this point, you're going to change one of them. You're not going to change all three of them.
Love it. Okay, that's the direction I'm looking for because so many individuals, clients included, clients who have been along the journey for a while, by the way, look at that 4 days and they don't go through those processes, right? Where they don't have the setbacks, they don't have the challenging days, we haven't hit the weekend yet. And they're like, okay, I'm good, I've got this. And it's like, okay, hang on. How did you get to navigate and kind of test your own accountability in those hard days or during, a difficult event or something? So I love that you're bringing up those examples so that people can hopefully draw their own parallel and conceptualize what that looks like for themselves.
Yeah, and I don't want to slow people's journeys more than we need to because we know that slow is sustainable, but slow can often be too slow,
Mhm.
right? It can be so slow that it bores us or removes us from the desire for change or the excitement of the journey too. And so when I say like when you first set those, say you're doing three BAMs and you set those three BAMs and it's been 2 weeks and you're like, okay, I want to change one of them because this one's really easy for me now. I'm going to remove it. I'm going to move this one in. You don't necessarily need to wait another 2 weeks before you change one of those other two you've been doing for 2 weeks. But I don't want you just rapid fire changing BAMs all the time. Like you're not, this is the same as going into a gym, starting a new program on Monday, and then starting a different program next Monday, and starting a different program next Monday, starting a different program next Monday. Like you will never make progress doing that. So you need to pick BAMs that you're going to stick to for the long haul. And when we do those reevaluations, say you're doing it on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, and you're like, okay, BAMs are going to be water, protein, sleep. My water goal right now that pushes me on a difficult day is 1 liter. My protein goal right now that pushes me on a difficult day is 3 servings. And my sleep goal that pushes me on a difficult day is 6.5 hours. Well, I get 2 weeks in and I'm like, you know what? The protein one's really not challenging me. It doesn't mean I have to remove it and put something else in. I could just up it to four servings of protein if I still want to focus on protein because I'm building momentum and I'm seeing the improvement in the way I feel and the way that pays off for me. You don't necessarily have to change things. And in most cases, if you're making progress, you're not struggling, it's not pushing you way outside of your comfort zone, we shouldn't really drastically change things. We should keep doing what we're doing.
Love that. Okay, so then genuinely, my last question would be, how can we help people understand when their BAMs are now just excuses?
Hmm. I think if you're hitting them like easily, it's time to increase your BAMs for sure. It's also if you're using them as a crutch in the sense that it's like I'm now just trying to get my BAMs consistently and there aren't better days, it's time to reevaluate. It's time to reevaluate our priorities. It's time to reevaluate our goals. And it's time to determine if these BAMs are serving us or not. They are there as a crutch when we fall back, whether that's for a day, a week, or a month. They're there to catch us, to keep us moving forward. They're not there to become our average or our norm. Remember that the average has to exist higher than the BAM.
Beautiful. And I feel like for those again who are listening and really pulling out the key points, they're going to know we answered that question throughout the entire podcast. Sometimes it needs to be worded very directly for people to understand, oh shit, he's said that a few times.
Yeah. And there's times where your BAM isn't enough to move you towards your goal, but it still needs to be low to catch you, to hold you there, to keep you moving forward in some capacity. But that might be like, okay, I need to get this up to the point where it is going to move me towards my goals. So as an example, say you have a weight loss goal. It's easy because of the numbers. Say you have a weight loss goal and you have a metabolic rate of 2000 calories. So anything under 2000 calories, we make progress. Anything over 2000 calories, we gain weight. Um, so say we set your BAM at 1900 calories so that you've got a 100 calorie deficit, you are making progress. But that gets to the point where it's really freaking hard. You're struggling, you're not hitting it a lot of days, life's throwing you a lot of curveballs. You might need to make your BAM higher than 2000 calories. And that's to stop you from binging, having a blowout, going way off the rails. But we also know that eventually we want to get that to the point where we are making progress again and it's closer to that 2000 calorie goal. So just something to consider as you set that BAM. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the green side of progress if it's stopping you
Oh,
from going deep into the red side of regress.
yep, I love that. And that just kind of bleeds into one of our other concepts, which is minimizing the damage.
Totally.
So that's wonderful. Thank you.
Cool. That's
Good.
I think that's helpful and great for the listeners. The last thing I'll leave you with, guys, is you don't need three BAMs. We talked about 1 to 3. Don't feel bad if you pick one. I tell people often to pick 1 to 3 daily priorities because when we have a to-do list that's 1 to 3 items long, we can often master it and feel really good about accomplishing our to-do list. There's days where one thing is enough.
Mm-hmm. It's very true. Okay, I'm gonna leave him with a tip. And it simply is to write this down. Because for so many people, they will listen to the insight, the concept itself, and it will go in one ear and out the other. If we can write this down, even if it's on a post it, keep it in a high traffic area, meaning like your bathroom mirror or a kitchen cabinet that you open lots. that says BAMs, and maybe you've got a list of 1 to 3 and you just have room to write them in, right? When you feel like you're struggling, it's a great visual reminder to set them, be reminded of them, and stick to them.
Mm. Like on the inside of the Jube Jube container.
As long as you can see it.
It's a clear container.
That's perfect.
Awesome. Thanks for listening, guys. We always appreciate you being here. Wherever you're listening, do us a huge favor, rate it, comment on it, like it. Send us your feedback and your questions to what you want to hear more of and what you liked and what you didn't like. Have a great day.